how does anybody get interested in writing? I think role models during my secondary school years, there was an English teacher, an old English teacher by the name of John Prickett, who was a big influence on getting us interested in reading for pleasure and not just, as part of our education. And, you come across books that really inspire you. I think for me it was 1984. My mother as well was a massive influence on me because she herself, and she's had a fantastic journey to where she is now, living in Llanelli, but as a writer she inspired me as well, as somebody who came over to this country with very little English, but now has written in English, in Welsh as well, and even was offered the opportunity to give some of her work over a few years ago now, but at the International Eisteddfod in Llanelli when it was there. I taught in one particular area of London, in Hayes, and I realised very quickly that it was a huge racial boiling pot, and a lot of the incidents, and although it was a fantastic school and there are lots of lovely memories from there, one thing that came through was the fact that in that multicultural environment, there were lots of issues stemming from that, and often because people with different beliefs were put in without any thought of where they were being housed, and it created difficulties in terms of racial hatred or xenophobia, and that sort of was echoed then in the relationships in the school. Sarah was on time leaving work and was as happy to see Greaves as he was to see her. So much so that she didn't hesitate to plant a firm kiss on his cheek before he started getting anxious about whether he could or not. Once again, she explained that Ashley was at her mother's, so the night was theirs to spend as they wished. Trying to avoid thinking of the connotations of that statement, Matt announced that she would be meeting his younger brother for the first time too. This went down well. Sarah was keen to know about Matt's family, and he had been considerably guarded about it during their post-coital moments. He had filled them in on the members, and ex-members too, including his father, but had left it at that. She had felt that was enough for the evening's interrogation, and although genuinely interested and unashamed of asking, she felt that if she pried any more, she might put him off wanting to see her again. I saw the idea of the central character, Matt Greaves. He could play a pivotal role in that story, and it sort of came from there really, because the environment that I was teaching in, there were lots of things I could put into the book there. I might let on fully how much of Matt Greaves is autobiographical. I have to be careful here because one of the central themes is the fact that he falls in love with a parent, and for my wife's sake, I will say that has never happened to me, but in terms of the way that he interacts with the children, in terms of a lot of what he says and does, it's taken from personal experience. There are little things that come in, the car that he drives, his attitude to taking sick days every now and again, and Greaves is a very complex character, and he's been through a lot in his life, ups and downs, but he's very jaded, and I think most teachers can relate to that. And personally, I found myself as well without direction at one point, and I think that's where we pick Greaves up as a head teacher now. I've experienced a lot in terms of what happens in schools during the day, and there's a lot that people can actually, that they don't know about the things that go on in schools, but I thought I can take that, use the genre of the thriller to sort of convey a little bit of that, but actually I knew I had a thriller inside of me to be written. Although they had shared their bodies with each other willingly, they would both be true in admitting to each other that they had shared much more than that, really. Although early on she felt an instant attachment to Matt, and she was shocked to admit to herself that his apparent vulnerability, which hid behind the sarcasm and wit, mirrored her own. As naturally as if they had been together for years, they instinctively reached for each other's hand as they began the stroll to the Arthur. Realising their meeting of minds on this point, they looked at each other briefly, shared a knowing smile, and made their way down the pavement, chatting furiously as they went. As planned, Nick was waiting on the pavement outside the pub. His breath condensing in the cold night air, he turned when he heard his brother and his escort arriving. Sarah immediately realised that they looked extremely similar physically, although Matt probably filled his shirt a little more with muscle. For a first novel, it's probably taken the best part of 8 years, this snatching the time here when the children were very young and piecing it together. I'm sure there are lots of writers who can sympathise with that, in that they can't devote the time, full time, to writing, and it's very cathartic for me, the writing process. It's a very pressured environment in education, and I love spending time with my family, but it gives a huge release to me in that sense, and that's what it did. And it was when I could find the time to do it, that's what it was giving me. It was giving me that release, and it was a very pleasurable experience when I could find the time to do it. From that point of view, obviously I'm not a forensic scientist. I knew people and know people who were involved in the police, and they were very happy to talk to me about the pathways that things might take, that events might take. When there's an investigation on, I've got some friends in CID, and it was very. On top of that, obviously my personal research, there was quite a lot of time looking at the internet. Obviously does have its purpose as well. Everybody goes on these days about people spending too much time on there, but there's some really valuable information on there as well. I spent some time, quite enjoyable time, doing it in the old-fashioned way and going to the library and looking at a book and or two and trying to find the information that I needed. But a lot of it, thankfully, I was very lucky to be able to know these people, and there's a network of people that I've built up over the years that I can turn to. Yeah, I'd had in terms of setting the book out, I'd had a look at various methods. Some people use a snowflake where each point on the snowflake branches out into other areas as the plot thickens. I chose a much simpler option, and for me what worked well was putting the central characters of the book into a grid, and then for each chapter, which involved each key character, highlighting the outline of that chapter and how that character was involved. I definitely had to look at the backstories of my characters, because in order for them to be three-dimensional characters and not just these two-dimensional caricatures, that they needed to have that substance behind them. I spent a lot of time looking at Matt Greaves's past. Nick, also his brother, who as a character is an opposite to him. He's a bit nerdy and a bit of a cavalier when it comes to money and things like that. Sarah's character, again, I spent a lot of time deconstructing that, and she comes from a place where she's had a very difficult upbringing. She's had a troubled relationship herself, and in fact, her ex-husband plays quite an instrumental part in the story as well. Reaching him, they stopped, and Matt made the first move. "Have you been waiting long? It's a cold one tonight." "Actually, I'm quite hot." Smirking, he removed his denim jacket. Underneath, He wore a black t-shirt, the front of which was adorned with the words, "Matt's got a new girl." "Sarah, this is Nick. Nick, this is Sarah. Let's get a drink." Matt was doing his best to keep a straight face, but it was too much. All three burst into peals of laughter. The ice firmly broken, they pushed the door open and made their way in. As the first of many drinks that night were passed over the bar, Nick looked at his brother and caught his eye quickly. Although he was the first to ridicule his sibling, he loved him dearly. And Nick had noticed immediately the change in his brother. With so close a fraternal bond, it was impossible not to notice. In the few seconds that they had while Sarah took her first sip from her pint, Nick took the time to mime his approval to Matt. The book is available on all Amazon platforms. It's on Amazon.com, the UK equivalent of that in Europe as well. It's in Kindle version and in hardback copy. I'm also in the process of creating an audiobook which is going to be available very soon as well, because I know some people prefer that as well. So it's about getting it out there to as wide an audience as possible, really.